we might go around and, oh, we're recording, thank you. I thought we'd go around and introduce ourselves. I'm PK Runkles Pearson. I'm the chair of the Oregon Law Commission and have been for a couple of years now. My current role is as the chief legal advisor to the Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan. I'm going to go around and just call on folks so that we don't jump all over each other. Mark, would you do the honors?
I'm Mark Comstock. I've been on the Law Commission for, I don't know, 10 years or so. I'm a bar appointee. I don't know if my term is limited or not, but I practice civil law in Salem.
Great. Judge Bushong?
Hi, Steve Bushong, Multnomah County Circuit Court Judge, and I've been on the Law Commission for a number of years, and Sandy can tell me when my term is up.
Judge Bushong, your term is actually not limited off your role, so.
You're stuck with us.
Welcome.
Krista?
Krista Obold Eshelman. I am another bar appointee, and I've been on the commission for 4 years now. And I work at Youth Rights and Justice doing juvenile law appeals.
Great. Jason, you're new with us.
Good afternoon, Jason Krupp. I'm state representative for House District 54, which is most of Bend.
Thank you, Jason.
John?
Hi, I'm John Perry from Lewis and Clark Law School. So I guess I am the Lewis and Clark Law School person on the committee, and I've been doing it, I guess, ever since Bernie Vail stopped doing it, whenever that was. So.
Fred, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Fred Boss. I'm the Attorney General's representative. I used to be the Deputy Attorney General, but I retired, and I'm back as the as special counsel, and like I said, representing the Attorney General.
Great. We're very glad to have your experience joining us on the commission, Fred. Judge Lageson, also a new member.
Hi, I'm Erin Lageson. I am the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals and have been since January 1st of this year. And Judge Egan told me this morning that this is a duty that has been now handed off to me. And so I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. So for those of our new members, I should say a little bit about the structure of the commission. You know, you've heard some folks saying what their various appointments are. I happen to be the governor's appointee. We also have appointees, 3 who come from the bar. Right. We have some appointment slots that are reserved for current or former legislators. We have a representative from each of the law schools, from the Attorney General, and from the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and the circuit courts. So Judge Bushong is joining us as a circuit court person, and Judge Lageson for the Court of Appeals. And I think Judge Duncan, Justice Duncan, is currently our Supreme Court representative, right, Sandy?
She is, yes.
Okay. So not everyone has been able to join us today. It was tough scheduling. We had to push it off until after the legislative session was over, in part because I know that was a very busy time for many of us. But now here we are, and welcome to all our new members, and glad to see our previous members here. I wanted to have a meeting now, not because there's anything in particular that's going on, although there are a few things, but simply because it's been a while and it seems like we're pulling out of sort of the COVID situation. I also wanted to update you a little bit on what's going on with staffing for the Law Commission and why things have been a little quiet for a while. So one of the things that happened right around the time that we started our COVID adventure is that our ABLE director, Sandy Weintraub, was tapped by the University of Oregon to be not only our director, but also the Dean of Students at the law school. Is that the right title, Sandy?
Assistant Dean. But
Assistant Dean.
Yes.
But it's a very busy job, and it was supposed to be an interim job. And then I understand that there was a failed search. And then there was a little while where there was no search given COVID. And so what was initially planned to be a short interim stint has now turned into a long interim stint. My understanding is that the law school is going to be starting that search again soon. And so that situation should be, resolved within the next few months. In the meantime, that has meant that Sandy's time has been quite frantic between that and also having two children at home who are too small to be vaccinated. So that's a heavy lift. And, as chair, my view was that we were all fairly busy during COVID. The money situation in terms of Sandy's pay has been resolved in fact, in a way that's saving the Law Commission a good deal of money, because he's only charging, I think, a very small fraction of his salary from the Law Commission, which means that there's been a good amount of savings in the meantime, which I think is to the positive. And I also think it's been really important for us to support this as a matter of comedy to the law school, who's been so gracious in housing the Law Commission and providing us all sorts of support. So that's been the position where we've been for a little while. In the meantime, we'll get some updates on some of the work groups that have been continuing. I'm hopeful that we'll start a small work group on a project that we've already approved moving forward. But other than that, I don't expect we'll have anything further for 2023. And what I'd like us to be thinking about generally is what projects we'd like to take on, as our staffing situation resolves, things start reopening, and we can start addressing some of the important problems of the state. So that's sort of the update from my perspective. And I'd welcome any questions that folks have. And then, of course, I'll let Sandy fill in a bunch more details.
I'll start just giving a little background on future. PK, thank you for your kind words, and thank you all for your patience as I have stepped into this role. As you can imagine, as all of you are majority law school grads, going to law school during COVID and running law school during COVID has been an exceptionally unique experience. I'm really proud of everyone here, but it has taken an exceptional amount of my time. So thank you very much for accommodating that. It's been really meaningful for the law school and for me. The situation should be resolved by the end of the fiscal year, when I've agreed, which is the end of June. The search is already open for the new position, and it should be resolved. The search, I think the applications close on April 3rd. There'll be an interview process afterward. So there should be some resolution to it by the end of June, the latest, potentially earlier. I'm committed to working through commencement and likely the end of May. But after that point, I should be able to commit more of my time to the commission, and then we will see what happens after that. But there certainly will be a full-time role again for the director of the commission starting at that point. So thank you all.
And I realize as I went around the group, I did not ask you to introduce yourself, Sandy, assuming everyone would know you. If there's any other words you'd like to say in introduction, and then I'd also like to invite Debbie to introduce herself as well.
Yeah, Sandy Weintraub. I am the director of the Oregon Law Commission. I've also, for 18 months, I've served as the assistant dean of students at the University of Oregon School of Law. Been the director of the Oregon Law Commission since 2018 when we moved over to U of O. We operate, U of O is our law school, is our gracious host in Eugene, but outside of before COVID, I was traveling a lot up to Salem and up to Portland to facilitate in-person meetings. Since then, it's mostly been Zoom, but for really any questions about the commission moving forward, feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to help. My role, for those of you who are new, is to facilitate the work group process, facilitate any information requests about our past projects with the commission, and just to try to keep us as a resource the best we possibly can to the legislature. And it has been really awkward. I'm actually proud of our work we've done during the commission. During the pandemic, and I'll talk about that when that time comes to the agenda. But I really do hope, as things hopefully do become more normal, that we can spend more time in the traditional legislative process and continue to show our worth as a really unique organization that can benefit the state. So thank you all for your service.
Debbie?
My name is Debbie Thurman. I was an officer of administration for the law school for 38 years. I worked for the commission 20 hours a week until last July, and I was cut back to 12 hours because I also was needed in another project. I love the commission, and I like working for Sandy and for PK. And I'm glad to see all the new folks. So,
We're really glad for your organizational expertise, Debbie. I know for myself, I really need somebody who's good at herding the cats, and that's not me. So thank you. John, I see you've just joined us. If you'd like to give a quick introduction, we have some new members, so we're trying to make sure we all know one another.
Hi, PK. Pleasure to see you.
You too.
I have been a member of the commission for quite a few years now. I think when I was appointed by Peter Courtney, who called me because he thought that Karen Minnis, who was speaker at the time, hated the Oregon Law Commission. And he said, DiLorenzo, I'm going to appoint you instead of a Democrat, so you can satisfy Karen Minnis that the commission is a good thing. And so I asked him if I could have a day to think about it. And he said, just a day. And so I called Karen and I said, Karen, Peter wants to appoint me to the commission. Why do you hate the commission? And she says, I don't hate the commission. And I said, okay, I'll take the appointment.
Well, I have to say that's one of the things I love about the commission is that I think it brings together, it's intended to, and I think it does bring together people from all different points of views and all parties. I was very proud to have taken over from Lane, who was a Republican and the chair for a very long time. So I think we have a lot to offer the state in terms of our ability to be able to discuss important issues in a civil way and to really bring in all points of view, as we've demonstrated many times now.
Yep. I will also say that for those members who have not chaired work groups, that's a pretty extraordinary experience. I chaired the work group on judgments, and then the work group on adoption, which was quite an enterprise. We had a group of over 50, one of the most disparate groups imaginable. I compared them to the lounge scene in Star Wars. That's how disparate they were, but we were able to come up with consensus legislation that it's probably the thing I'm most proud of on the commission for adoptees. It allows them to know their own story. And it was, I think, quite a great accomplishment for the commission itself. This year, or past couple of years now, I have chaired with the able assistance of Sandy and Valerie, the work group on LLCs, and we'll hear a report about that today. But if you do have an opportunity to chair a work group, it's really a great experience for the new members.
That's a nice plug because I may be seeking a chair for a work group today. So keep that in mind, folks. I will say, I think the work group that we're seeking a chair for is not nearly as colorful as the one that I recently chaired, which was the group on capital workplace harassment, which, as you can imagine, was quite colorful. But a great group of folks, and I think we did some real good. Any questions from any of the commissioners about either what we do here as a commission? I know for many of you who are new, or about our current staffing situation or our plans generally for the next couple of years. Wow. Okay, quiet group. Let's move on then. Sandy, have you addressed everything you feel needs to be said about the staffing situation?
I don't know if you wanted to, you said that you may have wanted me to talk about the budgeting in accordance with that. It's on the agenda later, but I'd be happy to bring up the savings as you talked about. I looked into it today. We're going to end up saving a little more than $50,000 just in this 1 year on that, potentially a little bit more. But it's the good news is it's going to put us in a situation that we have not been ahead of the game now for quite a while. We've been pretty constantly funded. So for those of you who are new, the commission was seated at Willamette University at their law school for many years. In 2017, Willamette made the decision to let it go. Prior to that, they had supported it institutionally with, frankly, with quite a bit of institutional backing. At one point, the commission had 3 full-time staff members. The commission has had at one point in time, had a full-time general counsel, not general counsel, but a staff attorney, as well as administrative support and a director. And at that point, they were handling upwards of 7 or 8 bills a session. In our current model, we're really in a position where we could either take 1 or 2 really big projects or 3 or 4, or maybe 5 smaller projects per legislative session. Also, in the past, there were some sessions, short sessions, that they would attempt to get bills done. What we've learned from the last few short sessions is that doesn't generally suit what the commission types of bills are for. Now we did get, I'll talk about it in our updates, we did get a bill through an emergency session during the pandemic, and then was made into a permanent bill during a long session. But that's how we try to organize at this point. With our current model at UO, we have tried to get some policy option packages in the past to bring on a staff attorney again. If we were ever able to do that, I think our capacity would go way up. So if there is ever a budget cycle that's possible, you never know. But we are a small, very small part of the Oregon Judicial Division's overall budget, and as a pass-through, and we try to be as careful as we can to ensure that we're funded in a way that we can operate for the state. So I think our savings at the end of the biennium, our savings will be probably closer to $75,000 or $80,000. So it'll put us in a better situation moving forward.
I think that'll be great for the fiscal health of the organization. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you may remember right before the pandemic, we were having some serious concerns about the continued viability of the commission. So I think that this opportunity, we'll look at it as an opportunity, has served us well in terms of the bottom line. We can talk more about that in the budget update as well. In the meantime, let's move on to talking about our work groups, the work groups that we have had going on over the last little bit.
Yeah, just going through the couple. So there were 3 bills that were passed in the 2021 session. As I said, we didn't bring anything up for 2022. The short sessions we've tried in the past, but due to limitations on individual members' number of bills, as well as committees' number of bills that can be brought up during short sessions, generally there are other priorities that have, and also the expedited timeline for the type of bills we have, as I said before, don't end up being preferable for those. So in 2020, when there was an emergency session to deal with the COVID issues, we had been tasked. Luckily, Mark Comstock, who's here today, was chairing a project where we were already working on to bring the concept of remote online notarization to Oregon. That became an extremely valuable tool during the pandemic, especially in the pre-vaccination timeline, where for a while the entire field of notarization was pretty much shut down. We were able to pivot very quickly that work group into creating a bill, which was already almost done actually, and presenting it to an emergency session first, and then and having that approved, and then bringing it back up to the 2021 session and having that law approved permanently. So that has been in operation now since the end of 2021 session. I haven't heard a lot about it recently, but I've certainly heard, Mark, I don't know if you've heard anything about the operation of it. I'm just curious.
I've used it once.
Okay.
And I've also talked to a couple of notaries, and they, at least one of which had gone through the training and was up and running, and others were aware of it and had started the training. And I've talked to a few practitioners who have used it, so it seems to be working well.
I can provide an update on that as well, just sort of from the national perspective. You know, after having joined the Secretary of State's office, I do spend a good amount of time with the folks in corporations, the division that runs notarization, and also have had an opportunity to hear about trends with this nationwide. And you know, the states who have not yet moved to remote online notarization are wishing that they had. And you know, so we really, I think we're on the front side of something, you know, very, very good and very important that I think will quickly become the standard nationwide.
Great. Sorry, my phone started ringing in the background, but I'll speak over it. The perils of Zoom meetings. The other major concept we dealt with was coming from our a group that has been exceptionally productive over the years, which is our probate modernization work group. That's a group that is technically still in composition because we still have an e-wills concept, which they have put on hold for a little bit, but is still certainly out there as something I know Susan Professor Gary, who's a member of our commission, is a big proponent of. And we may look to bring that back up after the staffing situation has been reorganized, not for a 23 bill, but because we know there is, especially in the judicial community, there are some skepticism that the feedback that's come back to us from some folks. We want to work through that the best we can before we bring a bill up. But in the meantime, that group did another idea that came up as a need during the pandemic was the need for remote attestation for a tremendous variety of different types of documents. And we were also able to get that bill. That was SB 220. For your record, SB 765, these are both 21, was the bill that came to remote notary. So that was the other major concept that we got through with with that work group, which has been chaired by Lane Shetterly for, again, since I believe 2013, one of our longest standing work groups. And I hope that's being used in a productive way in the state, but we were proud to offer those two services to allow people to participate remotely during a time where that was necessary. The third bill that we passed in 21 was a cleanup of an earlier probate bill, which was, there was actually, and that's not true. There was another bill, there was another probate bill that was that dealt with Chapter 111, which was another section of the probate code, which frankly, after sitting through a lot of the meetings, as not being an expert on it, Professor Gary could talk more about it, but that is an area of law that I'm not familiar with. But I know it was some needed changes in the probate code. And again, we are the go-to folks in the state for changes in probate, and that group still exists. So those were our bills we worked on in 2021. And again, I was really proud of that we were able to step in and provide some resources during a time that was very unique.
So that's everything on the accomplishments over the last year. So now we'll move to update on work group projects that are ongoing or soon to be ongoing, and starting with the LLC modernization work group. And Sandy and John, I think it'd be helpful to provide some of our new commissioners with some context around how much work we've been doing over this generally, and where it came from and where we're hoping to go with it.
All right, well, why don't I start, and then Sandy can add lots of details to my skeletal overlay here. But I think this work group has been appointed now for 3 years, I think.
That's correct. Yep.
I am incredibly impressed with the resources that are present on this work group. We put a lot of time and effort when Lane was still the chair of the commission to pick just the right people who were all practitioners in the area, who all got along with each other, who were all used to dealing with one another, but yet we try to honor geographic diversity too, so that we have business lawyers from all over the state. And of course, I'm a litigator for like 40 years. And so I don't know the first thing about writing contracts. So I've been purposely assuming the role of a decision maker who's going to have to pass on this, who doesn't know the slightest thing about what they're talking about. And so what I have done is after the first few meetings, we put together a structure. Valerie is really doing the co-chair work along with Sandy. There have probably been over 20 meetings of this group. They have just been dedicated to going through the intricacies of LLC law, trying to adhere as much as possible to the Uniform Act with the following goals in mind. Number one, make us be similar to our neighbors so that our law can be as similar to Washington State's, California's, Idaho's as much as possible, so that there aren't difficulties associated with filing LLCs and operating in Oregon. Number two, be as true to the uniform law as possible, but yet honor the specific legislative choices that have been made in the past. You may be aware of the fact that the legislature, for instance, passed special legislation to address shell companies and to do other things like that. And those differ sometimes from the Uniform Act. And what we've said is we're going for the Uniform Act, but we're going to incorporate every legislative choice, specific one that's been made. So that's where we're diverting from the Uniform Act. And the intention is to be business friendly in the sense of not being difficult to file and operate in Oregon. But we're not interested in creating a Delaware either, where, we all of a sudden now are trying to chase every single possible business organization to have them file here. We also, at my instigation, met with Dexter Johnson because it quickly dawned on us that if we drafted this bill in a way that is normally considered by the legislature, which is the full text of every statutory section and then amendments, it would be about 350 pages because there are that many changes. And so what we have convinced Dexter to do is to basically repeal what we have in our LLC statutes and then substitute a new code. So everyone can just have the code in front of them to review without having to compare back and forth to the old statute. We're also preparing what we call notes that show the changes from the current statute and the rationale for those changes. And for the members of the judiciary who are on our committee, I don't know if it'll work or not, but and also, Representative Krupp can probably attest to this. When you have a big giant bill that goes before a legislative committee that others have worked on, you don't find many volunteers on that committee to actually, spend 100 hours reading through a 50 to 100 page bill and making sure that they are the experts on the legislation. And so sometimes, the bigger the bill, the more of a dearth of legislative history you have, because all of a sudden, the legislative history is, oh, the Oregon Law Commission really liked this and it was a balanced group and it sounds good and it's a good bill and it should pass. Well, that doesn't help anybody if there's an ambiguity sometime in the statute. So what we are hoping to do is to also have whatever committees are going to consider this embrace the Oregon Law Commission report and hopefully suggest that become the legislative history, so that if there are ambiguities in the future, a court could at least look at that to try to glean what the legislature would have meant when they adopted this big giant bill. With all that said, we've got 3 more meetings planned. I am going to remove myself. I have already removed myself from the technical deliberations. And during the May, either the April or the May meeting, I'm going to reinsert myself and they're going to explain it all to me. And I'm going to identify where I think there are potential political minefields, where I don't understand it, just all of that, just to have a double check before we bring it to the legislature. And then we'll turn it over to Dexter and his group, and they'll write it, and it will be submitted as a Oregon Law Commission bill. We'll try to work with the presiding officers to figure out which committees are the best to handle it. And we'll make our committee notes once the Oregon Law Commission has approved this product. We'll make our committee notes and our commission notes available if the committee wants to utilize that as part of its legislative history. So that's the game plan. to try to pass this big thing.
That's a great
And-
plan, John. I really appreciate the outsider perspective. You know, one of the things we talk a lot about in our office is that if you're not an expert in a particular area, you need to be able to explain it to someone at a 7th grade level, right? Because that's the level that we all take when we're not an expert in the area. And so I really like that in terms of, you know, being able to explain it. You know, hopefully you'll be able to explain it to us when the when the commission approves it, and then, you know, to the legislature as well.
Well, I'm hoping my level is at least 12th grade, but I'll go ahead and we'll
No,
go
it's not
through
meant
that.
as a slam. It really isn't. I think that's a common level that we should all be prepared to explain at. And I'm sure your level will be much higher than 7th grade.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
just a
curious
couple-
if,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm just curious if folks have any ideas about, you know, whether there's any groundwork that we should be laying now in terms of explaining this to some of our legislators who may be on the key committees. Okay, well, something to think about as we go forward. Sandy, were you saying
Yeah,
something and I interrupted?
No, not at all. I was just going to give a little addition to John. John asked me earlier when we were prepping for this meeting, how many meetings? The 20 have actually just been since that we've gone to full Zoom. I actually think this group has met closer to 40 times in its complete composition. This is going to be one of the largest bills the commission will have ever brought forward. This is an entire rewrite of Chapter 63 of ORS. I don't know what the new number is going to be, but if you take a look at Chapter 63, it's a pretty long chapter and includes a lot of different details on every aspect of both the organization and facilitation of LLCs in general. And I'll reiterate, working with this group, and especially Valerie Sasaki, who's been the vice chair and has been the person who's kind of run the day-to-day on it, has been an incredibly professional and committed group. And I'm really proud of this bill. We've finally finished going through it after 2.5 years of the entire statute, and that's how big of a test this was. We're now going over it a second time, and that's we're going to hopefully complete that by the next 3 meetings we have scheduled by the end of April, and then it'll be turned over to Legislative Council for their redrafting, and we'll take it from there. But I'm proud of this process, and I think it's a bill. It's going to be a bill befitting of the Law Commission. A couple pieces of this bill was brought to, in addition, as future thinking, this bill was brought to us by the Oregon State Bar's Business Law section. And there is certainly some interest potentially with the Business Law section to follow this up with other connected projects to modernize other business organization statutes in Oregon. That could potentially be partnerships, it could potentially be corporations, which would be Chapter 60. These would also be large projects, but the idea of the revised uniform LLC law is to work in collaboration with these other business partnership laws. And while we have not, as a commission, approved that, I would expect after we continue the work and hopefully have Chapter 63 passed, the business law section may come back to us with additional requests to continue. I think it's been a worthwhile use of our resources, but I just want to give the heads up that we may be in the business of business organization law for quite a while now, especially if we're able to get this one passed.
Well, I think as both Sandy and John have recognized, you know, one of the people who really deserves a lot of credit, who's not in this room, is Valerie Sasaki, who has really, you know, carried a lot of the work of this and has been doing a fantastic job. I see Brian's joined us as well. Welcome, Brian. Nice to have you. Any questions or thoughts about the LLC modernization group before we move on to our next work group? Okay. Hearing none, let's talk about municipal and justice courts and how we're doing there.
Krista, do you want to start? And I can fill in as well.
Sure. I've been co-chairing this work group with Justice Duncan. And essentially, this was an outgrowth of the direct criminal appeals work group that had done quite a bit of work in years past and some unfinished business that it wasn't able to get to because it was kind of a different subject matter. That the justice and municipal courts have quite their own system and somewhat complicated and hard to understand. And so it's been kind of well, it's been a very interesting process to try and weed through everything and even understand what the current law is before trying to figure out how we might simplify it and make it more streamlined and easier to use for participants. And at this point, we've had something of a very long hiatus on the work. We were waiting for Legislative Council to be able to help us with a draft bill to give us a better starting point, not a starting point, but a midpoint, I guess, for the work, and trying to get something into a condition that we could start working on the nitty-gritty details of what can look the same and what should look different in the justice and municipal courts. And then there's courts of record and courts not of record, and how everything kind of fits together. So right now we are at the point of we've had the first reconvening of the work group in a year in, I believe it was it January?
Right at the end of January, yeah.
And I believe, well, I guess Sandy needs to fill me in on what's happened since then.
We're so the next steps, they're not unclear, but there are some challenges ahead. This is a bill. First of all, Chris, I want to thank you and Justice Duncan, who's not here, for your leadership and patience on this one. We took this on, I think, thinking this was going to be not an easy project, but at least fairly straightforward. And it became readily apparent that there are pieces of this area which are very complex. Justice courts, which I personally have learned a lot about, I've learned operate very much on their own kind of plane of existence, is kind of what we've been told in many cases, and trying to make sure that we have the support of all the folks we need to potentially bring this bill forward is going to be almost as crucial as the text of the bill itself. And I think being very slow and deliberate about this is important, but that also makes scheduling very difficult, because this is one group that I'm very proud of. We actually have representation all over the state, including the far eastern parts of the state, which is something that we've tried to seek out projects that could affect all many parts of the state. And in fact, when you talk about justice courts, a huge percent of our justice courts are actually in rural communities throughout the state. And this could have a tangible effect on the way they handle appeals. But we do want more representation for those groups, and scheduling to move forward with drafting. So first of all, we were delayed on drafting because our partners from Legislative Council were busy during the short session, and they're still finishing that up. But we'd like to get a meeting scheduled fairly soon. Well, a couple. We're actually working on scheduling two types of meetings. We're building a drafting group to try to work directly with our partners, Legislative Council, to actually work through all of the sections of the draft bill, which we now have. So we have a basis for our work. We want to then go through section by section, has been our usual model with the Law Commission, and then periodically check back in with the larger group to update them on the status of that drafting. But as we try to work on the scheduling for that, we also want to make sure we have the right people on the drafting group to make sure we're not missing key functions. So I would ask those of you who are involved in the criminal law world or in any way with these municipal and justice courts, if you have ideas of who we could add to provide perspective, and the one piece from my listening, especially to that last meeting, is especially with the folks who operate justice courts. Because, and Chris, I don't know if that was the view you got, but I do think that there are going to be people have been able, that this might throw a bit of a wrench into some practices, and I can see Judge Bouchon nodding his head, that have been going on for quite a long time. And this is being done with the goals of making the process more consistent and certainly more fair to all parties who are now treated in actually a remarkably disparate ways, depending on where their case is initially occurring. But we want to take this one slowly. I still have hope for 23 on this one, because, and it's really because we have this great draft to work on. And if we can get some consensus on it, I think the draft provides us a bill to actually move forward, which is something we didn't have before. But this is one I want to be careful with, to make sure that we don't bring it with great hope to the legislature and have constituencies knock it down.
So Sandy, Krista, not to be too blunt around this, but I want to make sure that the commissioners understand the nature of the difficulty. Is it fair to say that, because this has been so disparate and done so many different ways in so many places, there may be some folks in some of these places that are very attached to the way that things have been done and are perhaps resistant to what feels like more of a top-down solution.
Krista, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we've heard some of that from the people that are on the work group, and just I think the importance of having adequate representation from around the state and from the different kinds of courts. And also, I think once we have a draft, then sending it out for feedback from as many different places as we can before trying to do it something final. But I do agree with Sandy. At this point, we need to get some more representation. I thought it was from both justice and municipal.
It is.
And I think we also were looking for somebody from the circuit court as well. So,
yeah, that leads me to my question, and that is, Sandy, if you could circulate the members of so that because I can probably round up some either from the circuit court or from a colleague in the circuit court that has municipal or justice court, so that we have good representation. But I don't know who's already on the.
I'll get you that list as soon as I can. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping in, Judge, so I didn't have to put you on the spot. Anything further on the Municipal Justice Courts Appeal work group? Okay, well, thank you, Krista, and of course, Justice Duncan and Sandy for all of the work that you've done on this. I think it's going to be really meaningful. I'm going to turn to the last group now, and Sandy, maybe I'll let you give some background. This is the last group here is the one that the commission has already approved, but the work group has not yet been constituted.
Yeah, this is the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act, which is based off Uniform Act it's actually it's been enacted in many states around the country, and it has to do with the partition of heirs. And again, I'm not an expert in this area of law, but it was pitched to us, and it was the proposal came from Multnomah County Commissioner Jayapal, and it's something that there was certainly within Portland and also coastal communities. We were told that this is an issue where there have been parcels of land that have been owned by families for a long time. And then through the probate process, when a family, over time, the land is partitioned, for cash or whatever it is as it throughout history. And then when someone dies intestate, it then goes through a process where the property, which may now be worth quite a bit of money, because it may be in a location which is now ripe for development. And that's why we've particularly seen issues within the Portland community and within the coastal communities, are now the families lose the land in that process. And this is a uniform law that was created originally in the South, and many states in the Southeast have to combat against these type of practices. And it was something that's brought up for Oregon. It's a pretty straightforward bill. And if you look at the states that have passed it, it's been pretty much the uniform bill. Now, we always has just sort of gone through and has become law in a lot of states. So I think if we can get a solid work group together, this is one of those that Mark reminds me of at least our early attempts on the remote notarization, where it seems like it's a pretty straightforward bill. And if we can get a solid group, we might be able to get this one done in 3 or 4 meetings, sincerely. But we need the right people. Maybe. I mean, I'm not being optimistic, but if we have the right people, and at the time, this is one of those that really got hit by the timing of the pandemic. We were starting to get a group together in early 2020, had discussions, had meetings about it, and we just couldn't quite get the right group together. I know PK took on additional responsibilities, and that was changed her job. At the same time, I took on my additional responsibilities. So we're looking for a reboot of this one. It is a solid bill, and we think it would be very popular and another great service we could provide to the state. But PK, I don't know if you want to talk about potentially a new chair, but we would definitely need someone to take leadership and then to recruit members to get this process going.
Yeah, I'd like to give a little bit more flavor around the legal problem that this is designed to address. Is that, what often happens is that if a person dies without a will, then my understanding is the process will be, the property will pass to the heirs as tenants in common. And because each of them has an undivided piece, any of those people may either sell their piece or also move to partition the property. And of course, if you're talking about like a house, what you're really talking about is partition and sale, right? Is that the property will be sold, the sale will be forced so that the value of the property can be divided. And what often happens in these areas where property is ripe for development is that one of the, let's say, 6 siblings who co-inherits will sell their share to a developer. The developer will then use their right as a tenant in common to force a sale. And because the sale will be forced, not only will the members of the family probably get less than what they would otherwise be entitled to in a general market type of sale rather than a quick sale, but also they will lose the potential for appreciation of that property, even if they might have wanted to hold on to it and keep it in the family. They're not able to do that anymore. And many times the person who will buy the property is the developer themselves who forced the sale. So it's really a way of extracting wealth, inherited wealth over generations of a family. And unfortunately, I think this has a really strong equity impact as well. You know, this will happen in a lot of areas that are being prone to gentrification, like in North Portland, for example. You may have that family for whom, and if we know this among our families of color, it's more likely that if there is a house in the family, that is probably, you know, an enormous share of the wealth of that family, to the extent that they've been fortunate to have such a house. And that then, you know, that's really just taken away from their family. So my understanding is that this uniform bill is an attempt to at least provide some rights among the members of the family who originally inherit, to prevent those kinds of sales and to be able to keep inherited wealth within the family. And so we see this happening in, our North Portland, in some of those, I used to live in that neighborhood, frankly, where you see a lot of turnover. But we're also hearing, as Sandy mentioned, that this happens on the coast as well, where the Oregon coast is becoming more of a destination for folks from down south, and there are more people coming up to try to flip over those areas, and so families are losing that family wealth. So that's the reason for that Commissioner Jayapal brought it to our attention, is that she'd been receiving concerns from constituents about this happening, and I think that it's a really important issue for us to address. I know that Professor Gary is interested in being on the work group. I'm not sure whether she has the capacity to chair it. If there's anybody here who might be willing to take on, chairing that group, I think it would be, very much appreciated. And as I said, I think it could be done, and Professor Gary thinks it could be done within a couple of meetings in order to be ready for a bill for 2023. So if you're interested, I won't put anyone on the spot now, but please do contact me or Sandy. That would be helpful. Or if you have any knowledge of folks in your areas who might have the interest or expertise in this area to join a work group. Any thoughts or questions about uniform partition of heirs, which is the most boring and undescriptive name I have ever heard. We've got to do better. Sandy, I think you had the budget update next.
Yeah, I touched on it before, but it was more just on the reality of the budget savings, which I anticipate will be somewhere in the, again, it's a bit complicated because it's going through the university system, which is on a completely different timeline as the budget that comes from the legislature. So when I was looking at the numbers, it's more of just the cost savings that is going to come, frankly, from the director's salary being mostly paid for during the last 18 months by just that money just being set aside, because the university, I was being paid mostly by the University of Oregon rather than the Oregon Law Commission. So that savings will translate to additional funds that we will have as reserve. I don't anticipate us requesting less money during the next budgetary session, but I think that it will put us in a much better position. As PK brought up, immediately after the pandemic, when there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty about the budget, we were contacted by our budget liaisons at OJD, who asked us to establish cut scenarios. Luckily, that never came into play. And when we went through the 2021 budget model, we were given advice from them from OJD budget model to request a flat budget, which would cover, and basically our expenses are, the good news about our operation with UO is our expenses are quite low. Our expenses are the director's salary, our help with administrator. We pay about $25,000 overall per year for use of the building, and that's all in. So that's all the facilities work, support from tech support, et cetera. And that's pretty much it. That's really what our expenses are. So it's predominantly staff, and then otherwise, the nice thing about the law, and we also have a fellow. We currently have a wonderful fellow named McKenna Ratliff, and then we'll have another, we're going to be hiring a fellow in the spring, but that goes through the work study process. So it's very, very cheap. So we've been able to operate with that overall budget, which is more or less about $320,000 per biennium. So it splits to about $160,000 per year is our overall budget for our entire operation here at UO. And that's, we'll have time before the next budget request cycle. That won't occur until the 2023 session. But if we do feel that the budget is in a place as we move forward in the projections for 2023 to try to request any policy option packages to try to grow again, this may be the time, but we never really know when it is. The economy is, I know there was a huge surplus, and now who knows again. So, but the good news is, at least at UO at this point, we are quite stable. We are supported by UO Law School to continue to reside here and to be supported by it. And that's where we currently stand. But at least we're going to have some surplus, so we had a surplus, just a little background, between the transition from Willamette to University of Oregon, because there was no one in the staff position for about 9 months at that point. So that money was saved. But at this point, pretty much all of that money has gone away. So this actually has put us into a little bit of reserve when we had exhausted that prior to me taking on the dean position. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Fred?
Hi, yeah, this is Fred. Are these general funds? I guess my question goes to the point, can we keep the funds past the biennial mark? Or do they revert to the legislature once the, end of June of 23?
It is so my understanding, again, Fred, it's a great question. And I've only operated based off the arrangement that's been done. We are considered a pass through with OJD. So the money is given from the OJD budget directly to the University of Oregon School of Law. Then the University of Oregon School of Law administrates those dollars and the program as it sees fit. That's the way that it's been set up. So in the past, the commission has been able to keep the excess funds.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do know that the judicial budget is set up. There is a Oregon statute that is set up that allows the judicial department to keep savings. So I wonder if that maybe why it works.
I'm not an expert in this area, but that would make sense to me, because I do work with our budget liaison, and they've never flagged it, and they see our budget every year.
Okay, that was just a question whether or not it had to be expended before June of 23, or whether or not it's something you can continue to keep it as a carryover.
No, this will be my third session doing a budget, and our budget liaison has never mentioned anything like that, and they've known we've had savings in the past.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sandy, if you could just follow up on the basis for that, next time you talk to, I think it's Ray, right?
Ray Sachs at the law school,
yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm. That'd be great. Any other questions about the budget? I just have a couple of final things then to raise for everyone. I want us to be thinking as we're moving forward about future projects. And I just wanted to offer some of my thoughts around, what might be a good future project. Occasionally I hear from people who are interested in bringing something to the commission. And sometimes it sounds like an excellent idea. And sometimes it feels like the opportunity to use the commission as some sort of blunt instrument for a political purpose. And so I want to be, clear with this group about at least how I see it. I'm willing to have a discussion. Others may have additional views. But, my sense is that the way we are constituted is that we are supposed to be providing a forum to assist the legislature with research and thoughts about how things might be done, not whether or not something should be done. And sometimes I believe people come to us with something that has never been done before, with the idea that, we should be creating, some idea that might end up being very partisan. that is not generally the kind of thing that I see the commission as being for. I see us for being more for things that maybe aren't even sexy enough for the legislature to really spend a lot of their time or energy on, but things that desperately need to be done. And I think that, for example, the LLC project is a very good example of this. While people may have different ideas on the how that should be done, I don't think there's really a question that it'd be a good idea for us to have LLC statutes that work for both businesses and for being consistent with our neighbors and that actually work. So I think of us as an organization to make sure that things work, even when we've taken on some more controversial topics like the capital harassment work group. I felt that it was still clear, and everyone agreed that there ought to be a system by which the legislature addressed some of these issues. And the question that group was addressing was how, not whether. So I just wanted to point that out to you. At least that's a little rule of thumb that I use in my brain when I think about whether or not this might be a good project for the Law Commission. And I urge you to keep your ears to the ground for things that we might be able to do that could use our particular expertise. Welcome, Susan. We're just about finishing up, but it's lovely to see you. Next thing is I wanted to take
So PK, can I jump in there?
Of course, Judge.
So in the past, as I recall, the commission has had, and I think Mark and John have been on longer than I have, but in the past, the commission had kind of a subcommittee that would review new proposals and new ideas, then come back to the commission and make a recommendation on whether the commission should take that on or not. Are we going to continue with that practice, or what's the status there is my question.
We are going to continue with that practice, Judge. My understanding is that given a lot of the turnover in our group, we need to reconstitute that subcommittee. We didn't mention earlier either, there are also a couple of slots on our group that are unfilled, which we're working on filling. And I think that there's some issue in one slot.
There's one, it's a House position is what we're currently down.
And we've received an inquiry from the bar about reappointments. So, there's a little bit in flux, but yes, that is certainly the idea, that a subcommittee would make some of those recommendations. But I think it should be on every member of our commission to be thinking about, potential future projects and to be a representative in our various communities to hear about a problem that maybe the commission could be of service in. Any other thoughts about future projects or the process for that? Sandy?
Just letting you know, it's the program committee is that group that's been, and we had met actually the last time was to approve the Uniform Areas Property Act move forward, and we generally would, if we had a proposal on the table, what we'll usually do is usually several weeks ahead of the next scheduled Law Commission meeting, we'll get that group together to review, to have presenters come in and talk to the program committee about potential projects. Then that group will bring it to the full commission. So that is the practice that we would look to do once we got additional proposals.
Great. I wanted to take a brief straw poll of our group. The world has changed in terms of how we connect with one another. And it used to be that we would have some of our meetings by telephone, and then we would have a couple of meetings a year in person. Obviously, we all come from different communities, and we are all getting more or less used to Zoom. So does anyone have strong feelings about whether our meetings should continue to be by Zoom or in person, or does it matter?
Well, maybe I can chime in.
Don?
I find that when Zoom began, it was a matter of necessity. Now it's a matter of convenience, actually. And I can be a lot more efficient by Zoom as opposed to taking 2 hours to drive to Eugene, having a meeting, and then taking 2 hours back. That basically takes up the entire day. I do think you miss a lot, though, through the absence of collaboration with Zoom. a lot of collaboration takes place in a spontaneous way, and we can't really plan our spontaneity. So my thinking is that for most meetings we should choose Zoom, just because of the efficiency involved with it. But for the meeting when we actually approve the legislative proposals and place the commission's imprimatur on them and want to have some real give and take and discussion, because I don't think the commission itself is a rubber stamp for work groups. I've never, when I chaired work groups, I have never treated the commission that way. And we've always been well prepared for two reasons. Number one, the commission has great questions, but number two, it's always a good practice for what we're going to encounter at the legislature. So for those meetings, I think maybe we should meet in person, but for the other meetings, it seems to me that Zoom is just fine.
That's a helpful distinction. I appreciate that. I remember before the pandemic, at one point, we were being invited to come see the new Multnomah County Courthouse, which I have not yet seen. So I wonder if that offer is still on the table, maybe we might take you up on that for our next big discussion meeting, Judge Bouchon.
Offer is still on the table. But I do agree with John to the extent that we in positions of leadership can do things to reduce the carbon impact on our climate. We should do that, and that certainly weighs in favor of doing the bulk of our meetings via Zoom. With all that said, the new Multnomah County Courthouse is a significant investment of both state and local funds, and to the extent folks are interested in having a meeting here, we can certainly arrange that for any appropriate time. I'm happy to take the lead in making that happen.
Much appreciated. Yes, the idea of all the carbon being expended between here and Salem or Eugene on a regular basis has been on my mind a lot as well, particularly when the cost of that carbon seems to be going up by the millisecond. Great. Any other thoughts on meetings or meeting times? I just have one more thing I'd like to commend to you. For me, one of the primary reasons I wanted to take on the role as chair here was to do things that we could use to promote equity in the state. And, to that end, there is a fantastic new documentary that just came out on OPB today, which I commend to you. I watched it on my lunch break online. It's called Oregon's Klan in the 1920s, and it's the part of the newest season of the the Oregon Experience. And it's only half an hour and is quite terrifying and eye-opening, and really gives a sense of what created many of the things that we're all dealing with today. So I commend it to you and to those of you who are interested in learning more about Oregon's history.
PK, what was the name of it again?
It's called Oregon's Klan in the 1920s.
Klan. Okay.
Klan, yeah. Yeah, as in that Klan, yes. And it's part of the Oregon Experience series on OPB. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. It was lovely to see all of you. We'll be in touch about a